Hello, welcome to this video. This is a video that's a little bit on the unique side in that I'm gonna redo a video from a different perspective. This would be the coloring video for your tint and tone of your wild thing or your monster. You may have already started watching the other video that I did with Sam, and I did it from a different angle where I had the iPad in a position where you were watching me actually paint in my monster. You weren't able to see me actually mixing the paint. So I'm gonna do a different video for those of you who would like the visual of actually watching me mix the paint and fill in my tint and tone strip right here. So the materials are pretty much this. It's exactly the same materials as the video that you clicked on first. So if that video wasn't enough for you, then I want you to go ahead and watch this video so that you can see the visual of me pouring the paint and mixing the paint. So you would have the same materials: your paper plate, your paper towel, the paper plate 1 through 8 with the X, a paper towel from home, a paintbrush that was given out. If you have other paintbrushes, bring them on in. You also need your cup of water. You need green, black, and white paint. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to show you from a different perspective of how to mix the paint. That's going to be a different perspective than the last video. Okay, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to have you watch me actually pour the paint and mix the paint and paint in my paint strip. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, if you haven't already poured and you're watching this video instead, you're going to take your white paint, instead of the video with Sam in it. And if your white paint, like my white paint's a little bit on the thick side, so I can just sit here with my paintbrush and I can actually kind of mix it so that it loosens it up. And if it's still too thick to pour, this goes with any paint. You can just put just the tiniest bit of water in it and stir as well. Okay, so I'm going to start here with the white, and I'm on numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I am going to pour a little bit of white on 1, a little bit of white on 2, a little bit of white on 3, and a little bit of white on 4. And that's just to get our plate started. I may need to pour a little bit more as the lesson ticks on, but I just want a little bit of white on 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm going to cap my white just like this, and I'm going to come over and grab my green. Okay, open up your green. Ideally, a parent would be doing this, an adult in the house would be doing this. That's the ideal. If that's not possible, then I want you to just try your best to do this without getting too messy, okay? So if you want to pause the video right now and go see if an adult can help you out, that would be great. That would be ideal. But if you're doing this on your own, I just want you to be super careful and conscientious about not pouring too much paint. So I have our green. We're going to go on numbers 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I'm just going to pour a little bit of green. Whoop, it's all right. Here's my green, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, now I'm going to take my paper towel, wipe the rim of my green. Got a little bit of white on there. It's okay. And I'm going to cap it. Put that off to the side just for a second. I'm going to grab my black. I'm going to open up my black. And now I'm just going to do a little bit of black right below my X, right here, just below it, just right there. And then I'm going to wipe my rim right here. And I'm going to cap my black. All right, and so my paper plate's ready to go. I have a little bit of white here on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I have green on 5, 6, 7, and 8. Here's my X, and then my black is below my X. So you can put your pure green in the container. That's going to be, I'm going to refer to this as our pure green, and we're going to put that right on top of the X. Okay, we are ready to go. So I am going to read our reminders about having that, gets us in a good place to have a good attitude when we're doing our art lessons. Number 1, always try your best. Number 2, if you get frustrated, take a deep breath, count to 10, take another deep breath, and try it again. Number 3, everyone's art will turn out differently. Your artwork is uniquely yours. And number 4, art is not perfect. All right, let's get started. So you have your monster or your wild thing drawn. So I'm going to show you Sam's. Sam's is already painted in because I'm doing this video. I'm filming this video after Sam and I did the other video. So you're going to see his all painted in. So this is Sammy's, and that's his tint and tone strip all painted in. And then this is mine, all painted in. And so we're going to be creating all these tints and what are called actually shades. I use the wrong terminology. It's not tones, they're shades, the darker ones, okay? So we're going to get started on creating the tints and the shades. So in order to create a tint, what you do is you add white to a color. In order to create a shade, you add black to a color. And the more white you add or the more black you add determines the tint and the shade of it, just how light it gets and how dark it gets. So we're going to start on our X on our color strip here. So go ahead and put your finger on the X. It's lightly penciled in, the X. Grab your paintbrush, dip it in your pure green, and I just like you to paint in your X. Just like this. Like I said, the other video, I didn't show Sam and I doing any of the mixing on our plate or actually painting in the strip. I just showed you the strip after each painting, after we painted each one, and I showed you as I was painting my monster in and as Sammy was painting his monster in. So like I said, this is a different perspective. So you have your X all painted in, and now we're going to start by creating a tint. So on my number 1, which is up high, I have a little bit of white poured. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take some of my green, and I'm going to scoop it on the side of my white. You could also do a little pouring, but we discovered that when you do pour from the containers directly onto the plate, it can get very messy, first of all, and we can make too much of it. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of green from my pure green right here. I'm putting it right next to my white, and I am going to start mixing it very soon. I'm going to put a little bit more than what my white than the amount of white that I have right there. So I have about double the green to my white. So now I'm going to start mixing. I'm going to see what tint of green I get. It's going to be lighter. It's going to get lighter. And I'm mixing and mixing. And as I'm mixing, I'm realizing that I need more green because that's a little bit too light of a tint for our first one. So I've contaminated my paintbrush because I've dipped it into my white, and I don't want to contaminate my good green right here. So I'm going to just rinse this off in here, get all the paint off, and I'm going to use my paper towel and paint off the excess water and paint, and I'm going to dip some more green. I'm going to scoop some more green. If there is a parent with you, or an adult in the house with you, and they're comfortable, they can actually tilt the container over a little bit and maybe pour some out of the container like that. Okay. So, but I really am encouraging you more to scoop the paint out with your brush. Okay. So I'm mixing, and this is a tint that's a little bit lighter than my actual green, and I'm liking how how this one is turning out. So it's a little bit lighter than in here, and I'm gonna take my brush. I might do a little bit more myself here. Okay. And I just did what I asked you not to do, which was contaminate the green paint. So try your best not to dip back in after you've mixed. Okay, so now I'm gonna take this tint, which is just a little bit lighter, and I'm gonna paint in on my, oops, I have my tint and tone strip upside down. So I'm gonna flip this over. I want 1, 2, 3, and 4 going up, 5, 6, 7, and 8 going down. I'll say it again. 1, 2, 3, 4 going up, 5, 6, 7, 8 going down. And you're going to paint your number 1. And that is a tint lighter than your pure green. If you can see that, it's a tint lighter. And I'm going to show you Sam's. He has it a tint lighter on his strip, and then he has it represented in his monster. I have it represented in my monster as well. And what I'd like you to do is I want you to press the pause button, and I want you to paint in 2 places of your monster, 1 or 2 places in your monster, this light green tint. And I forgot to tell you to paint in 1 or 2 areas of your monster the pure green. So I want you to press pause. I want you to do 1 or 2 places in your wild thing or your monster, your pure green, 1 or 2 places with your first tint with white, and then I want you to press the play button and come on back to me when you're done painting in. Okay, so you're back with me. Go ahead and rinse out your brush, and we're going to get the excess paint and water off using our paper towel. You might have your paper towel roll next to you as well, or a stack of napkins. Okay, so now we're gonna go to number 2. We're gonna do our second tinting. So I have some white here. This time I wanna go lighter. So I want more white than I had this time. So I'm gonna use a little bit less green because I already have my white poured. So I want you to just eye it, and you can scoop next to it a good amount. Scoop it in, scoop it out from your container until you have about the same amount of green and white. See if you get about the same amount of green and white. And then go ahead and start mixing those. And this should be a tint lighter than number 1. This is going to be your number 2. It's going to be a tint lighter. There's an adult sitting with you. They can help you with this. This is the trickiest part, is the mixing, okay? And the messiest part, right? But it's fun to get messy. All right, so this is a tint lighter than number 1, my number 2. So I'm gonna take my tint lighter, and I'm gonna go to my number 2 on my color strip, and I'm gonna paint in a tint lighter on my color strip. Here. And then I'm gonna have you paint in 1 or 2 areas of your monster, this second tint of green, and when you're done painting in your monster, I would like you to come on back to me. So press the pause button once you've gotten to where I am, which is you've mixed your second tint, you've painted in number 2 on your strip, and you've painted in 1 or 2 places in your monster the second tint. So here's Sam's, and here's mine, okay? So go ahead and press pause, and do those things, and press play when you're done, and come on back to me. All right, so right now we're rinsing off our brush because we don't want to contaminate our pure green that's right in the middle. When I say contaminate, we don't want to ruin the purity of it. Okay, so it's a pure green, and we don't want to be dipping in white or black into this container here. All right, so I'm tinting lighter and lighter and lighter. So now I have my white here. Last time on number 2, we did about the same amount of green and white. So this time, since we're gonna go lighter, we're gonna need more white than green. So I'm going to start scooping some green. And I'm not going to scoop as much green as I did for my last tint. Okay, now I'm going to start mixing it. And I may mix it and it may look exactly the same as my tint here for number 2. And if that's the case, then I know I'm going to need to add a little bit more white to get it lighter. And that's what it's looking like to me. So this is the same, these look the same. So I think I added too much green this time if I wanted to get it lighter. So I'm going to need to add white. Now, you can add your white and your green to it as you see fit depending on how it's looking. So I'm going to just take my white and I'm going to pour a little bit of white in here. If you want to use your paintbrush instead, then you would need to rinse out your paintbrush entirely, dry off the excess paint and water, and then you can dip into your pure white. But we're not going to contaminate our containers. So now I'm going to mix, and I would like this tint to be lighter than number 2. This is our number 3. It should be lighter, and it's looking lighter because I added more white. It'll be a little tint lighter. Number 1, number 2, number 3, it's going to be even lighter. And I'm going to find my number 3 on my strip, and I'm going to paint in this tint of green on my number 3. All right, and then I'm going to add that tint to my monster or my wild thing. So here's Sammy's, here's mine. When you have done this, you've mixed your third tint, you've painted in your third, you've painted in your third square, your number 3. You've done 1 or 2 areas of your monster. You're gonna press play and come back to me, and we're gonna mix our 4th one. Now, just like the last painting lesson that we did when we were mixing our primary colors to make secondary colors and tertiary colors, we're only painting in 1 or 2 areas of our monster while we're doing the mixing, and then when we're all done doing our strip here, then we're going to use all the colors on our plate to finish painting in the rest of our entire monster, okay? So now we're going to go to our last tint. So I have my white poured, and actually I think I'm going to pour a little bit more white. Because this tint is going to be pretty much a white with a tiny bit of a green shade, a tiny bit of green added to it. So I'm going to grab some green out of my container, just that much, not anymore. And I'm going to start mixing, and I'm going to see if I get even lighter. I'm going to stay away from my black as best as I can. I'm going to see if I can get lighter than this last one. It's looking the same. I think I need to pour some white. I want to get even lighter. I should have just done a teeny tiny bit of green. That's okay though. Okay, so I just want the tiniest tint of green, and I want it to look more white, more on the whitish side. All right. So this one is just a tiny tint lighter than my number 3. So as soon as it's a tiny tint lighter, you're gonna paint in your number 4. Okay? And you can even see here, my strip is not gonna be exactly the same as Sam's, okay? Your strip is not gonna be exactly like mine. It's not gonna be like Sam's. It's gonna be your own degrees of tinting. But just as the important thing is it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. Okay, so your number 4 is the absolute lightest. Now what you're gonna do after you've mixed your number 4 and you've painted in your number 4, you are going to paint in 2 areas, 1 or 2 areas of your monster or your wild thing, and then you are going to come back and press play, and we are going to shade. That's going to be the next step. So we were tinting, and now we're going to shade. So I'm going to take my brush, and I'm going to get my paintbrush nice and clean out in my water. I'm going to paint off the excess paint and water onto my paper towel. I might need to call it a day on this paper towel and get a new one. So I'm going to get a brand new one, a fresh one, for my shading. So I'm going to start fresh here. And now I'm going to start shading my green darker. That's going to be 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I have my black already poured here. That was below my X on the plate. And I'm going to start by adding just a tiny bit of black into my green to get it a shade darker. So I'm going to grab about this much right here, maybe another scoop, maybe 1, 2. I'm going to do 2 scoops right there, and I'm going to start mixing. I'm going to see how this is going to change to be just a little bit darker than my pure green. I just want it just a tiny bit darker. If you don't see a difference, then add more black, but just a little bit at a time. If you see a gigantic difference, then put a little bit more green back in it, because that means you went too dark. Remember, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 shades of darkness. So this is mine. It's a little bit darker than my original green, my pure green, and I'm going to paint this shade on my number 5. So everyone's doing their number 5 right now. And then you are going to paint 1 or 2 places in your wild thing or your monster this shade of green, and then you're going to come back to me. So you're going to press pause right now. You're going to finish your mixing. You're going to paint in number 5. You're going to paint in 1 or 2 places of your wild thing or your monster, and then you're going to come back to me. Okay, so press the pause button. All right, if you're back with me, that means you're ready to shade the next shade of green. Create the next shade of green. So I'm gonna make sure that my brush is nice and clean, get the excess water and paint off, and I'm now going to my number 6. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4 of the tint. We did 5 of the shade. Now we're gonna go to number 6 of the shade. That also means we're gonna be on number 6 on our strip. So I put 2 scoops of black in here. So on this one, because I poured about the same amount of green on all of my areas, I'm going to do more than 2 shades of green. All right, excuse me, I'm going to do more than 2 scoops of black. 1, 2, and maybe 3. I'm going to start mixing, and I'm going to see how much darker of a shade I get. All right. So that's looking darker, but it could be more. So here's my black. It's out of its container. I'm just going to scoop, instead of rinsing out my paintbrush, I'm just going to scoop from the side of my black. Because when I'm done, when all is said and done, I'm not going to, the paper plate's going to be messy anyway. So I have my black right here. So I'm just doing a little bit of a darker shade than my number 5 for my number 6. So I feel like that's darker than my number 5. If it went too dark, then you could add more green to it to get it back to a lighter one. And then we're going to go to number 6. And this is going to be a little bit darker. Number 6. A shade darker. Okay? And I think I need more paint on my, so that you can see it a little bit better. I think I need more paint on my number 5. There we go. So you can see the difference in the color. And my number 6 is a little bit darker. Okay, so once you are done mixing your number 6 and you've painted in your number 6 on your strip, then you're going to paint in 1 or 2 areas of your wild thing or your monster, and you're going to come back. Now I should tell you, Sammy and I have completed the lesson entirely because we did our black Sharpie. That's why it's popping so nicely. Yours is not going to be this defined. I don't know if you could tell, but Sammy already did his black Sharpie. So if yours is looking like really messy and the colors are really like running together, don't worry, because we're going to do black Sharpie for the last video, and it's going to pop more just like this does. So yeah, you should have seen Sammy's before we did the black Sharpie. Well, you will when you watch the next video. All right, so press the pause button until you are finished with number 6 of your shading and you have painted in one or two areas of your wild thing or your monster. Come on back to us when you're ready for number 7, because we are going to shade a little bit darker for our next pour of green. So I'm going to go even darker with my black. I'm going to add more than what I added for this one before. So I added about 3. I ended up adding about 4. So I think I'm going to do about 5 scoops over on this one. 1, you're going to have to eye yourself. 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're going to have to, use your eyes for what's on your paper plate. If you need it to go darker, if it's just pretty much looking like number 6, then add a little bit more black to get it a shade darker. If it went way, way too dark and it's almost looking black, then add a little bit of green to bring it back a step. Okay, once you're done mixing a little bit of a deeper for number 7, I just grabbed a little bit more black myself. Once you're done with that, go to your number 7 and go ahead and paint in your number 7 just a shade darker. It's your number 7. And then when you have mixed number 7, you've painted in your strip for number 7, then you are going to paint in 1 or 2 areas of your monster. And then you're going to come back and press the play button to join us for the very last shade of green, which is going to be the darkest. Okay, I'm going to rinse mine. I'm going to gently get the excess water and paint off. And now I'm going to do my very, very last, I'm going to get this out of the way so you can see better. I'm going to do my very, very last shade of green. It's going to be so dark that it's going to look like almost black with a little bit of green to it. Just like we did for our white here with just a little bit of green to it. Here, I'm going to do a ton of black. So I might just scoop all of my black that's on my plate over here. If you need to pour more black until you get a really, really dark, dark shade. So I need way more black. So I'm coming over here, scooping up the rest of my black. I think I'm going to need to pour more out of my container. So here's my black container. Hopefully there's an adult who's assisting you if you need it. I just poured a little bit because with black, a little bit goes a long, long way. If it is looking like purely black and you don't even see a hint of green in there, you need to add more green. We do want to see the green to it. Okay, so that is going to be my darkest green right here. I'm going to paint it in on number 8, my last one. That's going to be my absolute darkest green. You see it here on my strip. I'm going to show you Sammy's strip, like I was talking to you about before. They're not identical. It just can't be. You're going to have your varying tints and shades of green, just as long as you see the progression of it getting lighter going up your tint and getting darker going down your shade. Once you're done mixing your 8th color of the day, then you're going to take your paintbrush and you're going to paint in 1 or 2 areas of your monster or your wild thing. Here's Sam's, here's mine, okay? And then you are going to finish off the rest of your painting in of your wild thing or your monster. So you have a paper plate full of different tints and shades of green. You have your pure green, and you're going to paint in the rest of your entire monster using all of these different tints and shades of green. And if you need to mix more and create more because you ran out of a particular tint or shade and you want to use that again, but you run out, then just remix it. And once everything is completely painted in, you are finished with this part of the lesson. And then you're going to need to put your strip and your composition that you've painted. You're going to need to put those two things in a very safe place to dry, where no siblings and no pets can get to it to ruin it. You're going to need to clean up your entire workstation, put everything away. We will not be using these paints any longer for any more lessons this month, so you are free to use these paint materials. If you have extra paper at home that you want to draw something on and you want to paint it in, if you have a sibling who you want to paint with, now is the time that you can do that. If you finish up all the paint and you would like to rinse these out and return them and bring them back to school for the next material handout day, just to recycle them and give them back to the teachers, please feel free to do that. And then you, big fourth graders, I'm expecting you to be responsible for your workstation. I'm expecting you to be cleaning it up with the assistance of the adult in your house if needed. Otherwise, I think you can do it. And here's the paper plate once it's all dried. So I've obviously already painted mine. This was my paper plate, and I used pretty much all the paint that was on my paper plate. So I let it dry so that I could show you guys how cool it looks. So that's what it's gonna look like when it's all used up and dried. Good luck painting in the rest of your monster, your wild thing, and I will look forward to seeing what they look like. You are gonna come back for the very last video, the fourth video, with your dried composition, your dried strip. You're gonna come back and we are gonna put our names on the back of both things, and we are gonna use a Sharpie, and we're gonna Sharpie the pencil outline that separates all of our tint and shade colors throughout our wild thing. So good luck, have a good time, and enjoy. We will see you for the next video.